So for my first week, the name of my OS is Ignite. I'm going to try to target it towards more elderly people. So what I'm thinking is trying to keep more important buttons like the shortcuts or something on the bottom of the screen, because I feel like most people use their thumb to move about a phone. And I want the date and time and day to always be visible, so in case of forgetfulness or anything like that. And I want it to be easily organized sections that are just very clear, and I want more space in between the buttons for maybe arthritic fingers, but maintain that sleek design. I want to go for a more muted color scheme. I did some research on elderly people and the brands they gravitate towards. It tended to surprisingly be very modern and sleek brands such as Apple and Amazon, because they're more trustworthy, but there's a level of trust already established there, obviously, but it's good to know that they also sort of gravitate towards that. I also wanted to make sure the icons pop out slightly, so I added a slight drop shadow to the icons, but not the app. So yeah, that's where I'm at. So for week 2, I've kind of started to be able to build this out a little bit. And I have my load up screen here and my home screen and sort of how I want my shortcuts to function. And I want to have a alert for an ambulance or 911, because again, targeting it towards elderly people, and I want them to have sort of that security and something unique. I started working on that button and the settings, and I sort of got a little something going for my desktop, but not much. I'm mostly focusing on the phone. So here is my week 3 update. I have my startup animation pretty much done, and I have a little reminder here to do my login and users. I pretty much have my homepage and my shortcuts and everything pretty well structured on my phone. Most of the phone here is pretty much done. I just need to keep filling in the actual content, like on the settings buttons and stuff. But pretty much everything is already prototyped. So I kept the orange gradient, but made it more subtle and added the white rounded squares behind the app icons. I finished the weather and reminders app and continued connecting all the pages. And I revised and made adjustments to the 911 button, and I need to work on the animation for the other systems. Week 4, I struggled with problems. Even though I'm connecting the artboards properly, there's a black screen, and I had a problem with the transition between artboards where it would scramble the elements before going back to normal. It turns out there was an older draft of the design underneath it, and it was showing during the transition. That's still happening to some of my boards on the iPad, I think, especially, but there weren't any designs under that one, I don't think, so I'm not really sure. And I also decided to start using windowed modes for the desktop and game console because it was easier to adjust the layouts to that than the whole screen, but it alluded to the full screen existing with a button. I also decided that having the open apps screen was pretty unnecessary for the desktop and game console versions. So week 5, I have everything done. I am still having some issues with the animation, the startup animation. It was working fine for a while, but now it just goes to a black screen after it's done playing, even though I've linked it to my login page. So I'm not really sure what's going on there. So I've just decided to take it out and just put the file in on its own when I turn it in, because I've tried pretty much everything that I know how, and but everything else is pretty much done, and it's all pretty similar, but there's a little bit of variety between all the systems. So this is my first login screen. You can go to not you or log out to switch between the two users, and then click login. And there's the shortcuts bar with the 911 alert, and it'll ask you, are you sure, to prevent anyone accidentally clicking it. And there's also this sort of sidebar where you can access the weather app, and the shortcuts are always available. There's the reminders app, and there is the settings app. And then lastly, there is all of the open apps, and you can access any one of those by clicking on them. So here is the iPad. It's pretty much the same thing. I did have some trouble here though with that glitching. But then there are the shortcuts and the 911 alert, the sidebar, and the weather app in the iPad. And of course the shortcuts are available, the reminders app, and the settings. And then the open apps. Here is the gaming console. The login is exactly the same. And here the icons are a little bit bigger just to suit that smaller screen. I was going for a DS. And there's the settings, the weather app, and the reminders app. There's the 911 alert. I'm not really sure how that would work on a DS, but it is there, or why my target audience would have a DS, but there it is. So here's the desktop version. Login is exactly the same. I felt like it worked well across all the different platforms. And here's the desktop background. I called the shortcuts a dock for the gaming console and desktop. I just felt like that made more sense. And for all my apps, I used a windowed version because that was the easiest way for me to translate and not have to resize everything so much. And there's the sidebar, which you can access those apps. And I kept the exit and minimize and expand all at the lower portion because I feel like that's more accessible. So the first user tester is Megan. I just asked her to find the settings, weather, and 911 alert and close them all. And I had her testing on the phone. Megan's feedback was, I like the design a lot. It kind of looks like an iPhone, but just customized or something. It was very easy for me to find and exit the apps you asked me to. I feel like it could have been a little more unique, but everything was clear-cut and pretty easy to use. The second user tester is Cassidy, and I had her find the same apps and close them, and I had her do it on the desktop. Cassidy's feedback was, I think it looks good. You've shown me some of your stuff before, and this feels a lot more corporate and clean than what you usually do. Not good or bad, just my observation.